to the eye, I'm not a doctor. It didn't look that bad. They're gonna be looking at me like I did this. You know what I mean? And so sometimes I felt like ignorance was the best answer, because he was basically just seeking attention at any cost. You know what I mean? Any cost.
When law enforcement arrested Mutahan McLean for his son Takoda's death, Mutahan claimed he couldn't live with this tiny monster. He was a difficult child with really weird behaviors, and he had to be disciplined. That's what he said. But the reality of Takoda Collins' life was nothing like his father had described. Poor Takoda never really had a chance at a normal, happy life. His entire life was ridden with unimaginable pain at the hands of 3 cruel monsters. What detectives uncovered that day is worse than any horror movie. Takoda wasn't just unalived in a day, he was isolated to death. Let's explore the tragic story of Takoda Collins. But before we go on, I must warn you, the following video contains graphic descriptions around a very sensitive subject. It was December 13th, 2019, and paramedics in Dayton, Ohio were called by a father who claimed he'd found his son unresponsive. When they arrived at the address, they found 30-year-old Mutahan McLean walking around the house. He was wondering what he should do now that his son had passed away. McLean wasn't crying, and he was pretty sure his son was gone. He just wanted to know what the following steps were. When the dispatcher had instructed him to do CPR on his son earlier on the phone, he complained about how his son always broke the rules. When the dispatcher instructed him to give his son mouth-to-mouth recitation, they heard McLean retching and complaining that Takoda's stomach smelled really bad. This is horrible enough, but wait until you hear why the smell was bad. The paramedics found 10-year-old Takoda lying unresponsive on the floor of his living room. But there was something that his father hadn't mentioned. His entire body was covered in contusions. At this point, a pair of officers had arrived at McLean's house too. One of them stayed on the front porch with McLean, asking him why his son was in that state. McLean didn't even try to cover for himself. He went on and on about how Takoda was a bad, disobedient son, and how he didn't know what to do with him anymore. Just then, the paramedics exited the house to deliver the bad news. There was nothing they could do to save Takoda's life. To this, his dad said, "All right, I tried to get you guys here as fast as I could." The whole scenario was disturbing enough to have McLean arrested that night. Meanwhile, Takoda's body was transported to the nearest hospital for an examination. The coroner found things so devastating they can't be described here. There were marks all over, some of them new, some of them months and even years old. Takoda's death was concluded as blunt force trauma combined with compressive asphyxia and water submersion. The manner of death? Homicide. Before being taken to the station for interrogation, McLean told the officers he lived alone with his son. 3 minutes later, his girlfriend came home. Did he honestly not think that would happen? 30-year-old Amanda Hintz marched in together with her younger sister, Jennifer Ebert, and a 3-year-old boy. It turns out that all these people lived with McLean and Takoda. As all of the adults were taken to the station for questioning, detectives obtained a search permit and went through their house. What they found was as horrific as Takoda's coroner's report. While the ground floor was furnished and had running water, the attic told a different story. When the detectives entered the attic through a small door, they were hit by a pungent smell. Human waste decorated the sordid attic. Its window had been blocked and covered. Even though it was daytime, the officers had to use flashlights to make their way around the place. There was no furniture, with the exception of a broken chair, and secured with a lock was a smaller door to an even smaller room. When the detectives broke their way in, they found an even more terrifying sight: an old lawn chair and a tarp covered in red marks. There was even a camera fixed opposite the so-called bed. McLean had just disconnected it before calling 911 that day. But as the detectives presumed, it was used to spy on Takoda 24/7. Takoda was not treated like a son. He was a prisoner in that house. There were no pictures of him downstairs, no toys or school books for kids his age. And even more horrific details would turn up in the 3 adults' interrogations.
Been heard you race before?
Yeah.
You have?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mutahan McLean had had his run-ins with the law before, but for charges far less serious than this. In fact, he even seemed confused about the meaning of his current charge.
Homicide, that's like premeditated.
Homicide's kind of a catch-all for somebody that died more than likely not of natural causes. Make sense?
But McLean continued to say that he didn't really understand why his son had passed away and hinted that he wasn't really responsible for it. However, the detective had his file and knew what the detectives had found at his house, so she didn't act too patient with McLean.
That's kind of what this opportunity is for you to tell us.
To
We don't
discuss
know,
it with
we
you,
weren't
because,
there.
right.
You were there, we weren't.
When she asked McLean what exactly had happened that day, he started talking about his disobedient son again. According to McLean, Takoda often hurt himself by playing rough and refused normal food, preferring to eat his own waste instead.
The kid keep falling down the stairs, keep knocking his head around. It looked like something was wrong with his stomach last night that I noticed, and I gave him some water to throw out.
If you listened to McLean, it sounded like he tried to protect his son and teach him not to behave in this self-destructive way. But the detective knew better than to believe this monster. She hardly had to say anything while McLean was burying himself in lies and shocking claims.
Very tired, I ain't slept in 3 days, so I'm just sitting there, and here he come rolling down the stairs again, ba-doom, ba-doom.
McLean claimed Takoda did this to himself. When he saw this, he rushed him into the bathroom to wash and treat him. Still, he never explained why his son was covered in marks when the paramedics found him. When the detective confronted him with this question, he revealed a crucial clue.
Well, he had marks all over his body.
It's every day. Now, sometime I had to his behind just to prevent him from hurting himself. This boy jumped out the window before.
With this, McLean revealed two things. One, he admitted to touching Takoda, and two, he confirmed the window in the attic was blocked because Takoda had tried to escape his house of horrors through that window. That's a pretty bad sign if a child tries to run away from home by jumping from a first-floor window. McLean didn't even understand this. He continued to paint Takoda as an abnormal child with weird tendencies. Did he really not see how this story looked from the outside?
There's no stopping him. I'm afraid. I've been telling people I was afraid, but at the same time, there was nothing I can do.
McLean revealed that Takoda was moved upstairs 2 years prior when his baby brother came to live with them. Yep, the 3-year-old boy was not his son, but his brother. In 2017, he'd gotten custody of him, so he put him in Takoda's room and moved his son into the attic. According to McLean, they moved him because he was behaving inappropriately around the baby. When the detective asked him why Takoda had no clothes or toys, this is what McLean said.
I can't get a boy a blanket, because if I give him a blanket, now he has marks all over his body from him pissing on himself and wrapping around his own blanket. You know what I mean? If he did that continuously, there'd be rashes, and that's unsanitary. Flat out. And there ain't no way to keep a child like that.
Says the man who kept his son locked in an attic full of waste. Perhaps the most disturbing thing of all, McLean continued to confess to some of the most horrendous crimes, unprompted by the detective. He didn't realize he was confessing. He thought he was blaming his son for his death.
But that's the kind of stuff he was into. I ain't never harassed my child or do nothing like that. That's homophobic.
Wait, what? First of all, the detective hadn't asked him about the suspicious injuries found in the autopsy report. Second of all, that's the problem? That it would be gay? When the detective asked McLean if he had ever taken his son to a doctor, he said not in the last 3 years. His insurance had expired, and anyway, he was healthy.
I probably had some online counseling services or online counselors talk to him. And I did have counselors speak to him. He would play them so slick to the point where it'd be like, he's all good and golden.
Yeah, this poor boy would play his counselors. Everything that comes out of this man's mouth is sickening. Throughout the interrogation, McLean reportedly complained about his state. He hadn't slept, he was stressed by his son, and he didn't understand why he had passed on. Not once did he show grief or remorse over Takoda's death.
Okay, what's the stuff he's learning about right now?
Well, he was learning, but he refused to learn. Every book that I bought him, he pissed on it, he shit on it, he destroyed it, pens became a factor of safety and pencils, you know what I mean? Ain't no winning.
So you're not homeschooling.
As it turns out, Takoda was pulled out of the school system when he was in 3rd grade. It wasn't because Takoda would be schooled better at home. His dad couldn't stand how the school was trying to bathe and clothe the poor boy. He wanted complete control over his son. Finally, the detective asked him for a complete timeline of the events of the day.
6 a.m. this morning, I look at the camera, I see him on his table, his chair. I don't think nothing about it. I'm just like, he's doing his normal weird things. Sometimes I felt like ignorance was the best answer, because he was basically just seeking attention at any cost. You know what I mean? Any cost.
Yeah, because you kept him locked in a horror attic. McLean's account was stomach-turning, even more so when you think it wasn't Takoda who did it.
So, put him in the shower. I put him in the bathtub, and I tried to clean it up and look at it to see if it was worth me taking him to the ER right away. They gonna be looking at me like I did this. You know what I mean?
Yeesh. Still, that was McLean's only problem, that he might get arrested, and he was innocent. The problem was he'd forgotten that his girlfriend and her sister were being interrogated too, and they had a different side of the story to tell. According to McLean's girlfriend, Amanda, McLean had always been extremely controlling of Takoda. He required daily updates from his school teachers. If the report said anything but amazing, Takoda would be subjected to unimaginable things at home. The school sent child protection services to his home several times. When they started taking care of Takoda, giving him baths and fresh clothes, his father pulled him out. And when CPS arrived at their home, Takoda was instructed to stay behind the locked door and make no sound. When the CPS agents requested to speak to Takoda, he was shy, quiet, and gave perfect answers. He had no complaints about his dad. In fact, he was scared for his life. Takoda would only come out of the attic to use the bathroom or to eat. But that was just when McLean allowed him to. Sometimes they just didn't. And the little horror bed in the back was also for special occasions. Most of the time, Takoda lived in complete darkness in that filthy attic. McLean didn't allow his son any clothes, and yet if he came out of the attic to use the bathroom, McLean would accuse him of flashing in front of his baby nephew. McLean was increasingly monstrous with his son. He would push him into a horrible situation and then punish him for trying to survive. It went like this for years, and the two women in that house stood and watched. No, literally. In the evening, they would all take a seat on the couch and watch Takoda on the spy cam in his attic room. Amanda's sister Jennifer said that she once heard Takoda crying from another room. He said, "No more." Both Jennifer and Amanda testified to seeing McLean on the spy camera doing atrocious things. Jennifer also gave a clear and chilling account of what happened on that fateful day. On the morning of December 13th, Jennifer called for Takoda to come downstairs and use the restroom. He exited the attic, but almost stumbled down the stairs. He had not held on to the walls. When his dad saw this, he elbowed him in the back. Then he ordered him back upstairs. Once upstairs, he instructed Takoda to put away his folding chair. Takoda wasn't fast enough, so McLean inflicted unimaginable pain on poor Takoda. He then came back downstairs and casually watched TV with the two women. Every now and then, he would yell slurs at his son, and then he had another idea. According to Jennifer, he'd been doing this to Takoda on a daily basis over the last week of his life. He called it parenting. Then he took him into the bathroom and did things I cannot even begin to describe here. Takoda's experience was absolutely sickening until his very last day. For poor Takoda, death was mercy. It was also the end of the three monsters' freedom. Mutahan, Amanda, and Jennifer were arrested and charged with murder. McLean was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 51 years. Honestly, it's shocking there's even a possibility for parole. However, it's unlikely someone with his record will make it past the age of 80 in prison. Amanda Hintz was sentenced to 22 to 27 years as she pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and several counts of child endangerment. Jennifer Ebert was also sentenced to 8 years in prison for the same charges. She was in the same house as McLean, and yet she never phoned the police or CPS or even tried to save Takoda in any way. Takoda's story is one of the most tragic cases ever covered here. It is heart-wrenching to even think someone endured this kind of pain for so many years. He was an innocent boy who stood no chance at happiness. Hey, thanks for watching. It's hard to even ask you guys to leave a comment. Just write something nice for Takoda as we try to remember and honor him today the best that we can. Remember to like and subscribe. See you next time.